Welcome to another episode of Talks with Tech Leaders. So today I'm really excited to be joined by a CTO who works in a software company that is actually tailored towards my industry, which is recruitment. So John, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having
me. And would you mind just giving a bit of an intro to yourself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so my name's John Kerr. I've been in the industry for 18 years now. Currently the Chief Technology Officer at Conquest, which is the first and only commission and incentives rewards platform tailored specifically for the recruitment industry. So challenging job, but a rewarding job. And been there about 4 or 5 years now. And we're just kind of getting to the point now where we're looking to kind of grow and scale in the next few years. So exciting times to be on board.
Yeah, definitely. So it was great to have that chat earlier because we were discussing how there's been like a real uptake and boom in terms of like recruitment software out there, and I've noticed a lot especially with AI and a lot of like email automation, business development tools coming through. So as I said, it was great to speak to you about some of the stuff that Conquest are doing because commission, it's part of every recruiter's job,
absolutely.
And I would say, even from my own experience, when having more members of staff, how complex it can get when it comes to basically just using spreadsheets and emails to see when placements were made and things. So it's quite an interesting concept. Where did it sort of start from?
Yeah, so my colleague and business partner Carl, he actually owns a recruitment business, and he encountered the problem that you just explained there, where it was like, I'm getting spreadsheets put in front of me, we're trying to do payroll, I don't know any of the detail here, I don't know whether this is correct or not, and he was just kind of like, there's got to be some kind of room for innovation, like the classic saying, every spreadsheet's a future software product. It's the same sort of thing here. So Carl started the business, originally had an MVP built externally. And those guys kind of proved the concept, if you like, but it wasn't really at market or anything. And obviously, I've worked with Carl for now 15 years at the time, probably more like 10 plus years. And Carl was just like, I want somebody to help me kind of take this to market. And I think I'm onto something here. And that's when I kind of got involved. So I was ready for a change. I'd been at the previous company for technically compatible for, I think it was 4 years in the end. So I was ready for a change anyway, and Carl was just like, stars aligned, and I got on board. And it was a lot more complex than I was expecting, I'll be honest. I've worked with a lot of sales teams over the years, and it's always just kind of been a flat percentage and quite straightforward. Wasn't expecting the level of complexity that recruitment brings, but the human capital element and everything else, all good challenges to get involved with.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
From a technical perspective, it's an interesting domain to work in, and there's fresh challenges like literally every day. Every conversation we have, there's something new that we haven't seen before, or that's we've seen a different flavour of it in the past, and so it keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, it's definitely quite complex. Because even walking in, I was thinking about when I've worked at recruitment companies, each one has their own different commission structure. So some might have a threshold, and for people that don't know what a threshold is, it's like you have to reach a minimum amount of revenue before then you qualify for a bonus. Whereas some companies, they just offer a bonus from every penny that you bring in revenue, you're getting a percentage bonus, but then that can be on different tiers. So whether it's 10%, 20%, 25%. I think we were talking about complexities like got split fees, you've got months where if you don't bill in a certain month, but then you bill quite a lot in the following months, and then how you bring that together. So I think on the face of it, it does seem quite simple in terms of, rather than using a spreadsheet, we've got a software that you can input your deals in. But then I guess behind that, you're having a different challenge with every recruitment company almost, because they've got their own structure in. So has that been quite difficult or quite challenging to bring into play as well?
Yeah, I mean, that is the biggest challenge really that we've had to date, other than bad data, because consultants aren't always the best at data administration. So I mean, those are the two main challenges really. Is the veracity of what's coming into the platform correct? Yeah, okay. So that's one challenge to solve, and then the next thing is, can we model what the company's already doing? Because that's typically with software products, there might be a bit of leeway there, but obviously because it's people's remuneration, there's not that much leeway. Like if you've worked as a consultant yourself, you know that if somebody comes to you with a new commission structure and it's you're going to be £10 a month worse off, you're probably going to query that and say, well, I'd rather stay on the old structure, thank you. And we've seen it even over the years where like we've worked with companies that are quite big and doing well, but they'll have individual consultants on their own commission structure because they're like their top billers or they're longest service member, and that can be sometimes that's the only one we can't support, and it's kind of so we have to. But obviously they want everybody to be consistent and have the same experience, so it's definitely a challenge. But I think we've over time now we've seen a lot and we've dealt with a lot, so the product's in like really good shape now, really robust. We don't hardly get any like issues coming through to us where customers can't do what they want to do. But the majority of the issues we get is just that there's maybe a data issue which has come from source, so we just have to help them with that. But yeah, I mean we're in good shape.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's really encouraging to see Northeast, companies, scale and do well. And you've recently received an investment as well from Bullhorn, who one of the largest recruitment CRM companies in this space. So that must have been really exciting to know that what you've been building and creating for the last 4 years actually has some legs to it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Bullhorn, they are the big, as you say, one of the biggest players in the space, and for them to give us that validation that we're building something that they feel their customers would benefit from, and also, I mean, we already had a partnership with Bullhorn, so it's gone on a while back, but the fact that they've seen us as a candidate for investment as well is obviously just a massive validation for everything we've been doing for the last few years. So yeah, it was a good day when we had that conversation with them, and we're now obviously just looking to build a long-term relationship with them as investors as well as partners, and hopefully go from strength to strength with that relationship.
Yeah. So as we were discussing earlier, you're pretty much a hands-on still CTO. So whilst you were building Conquest, and we'll speak about some of the other businesses that you've been involved in as well. It's been, as you said, pretty much yourself and another developer that's like built this whole thing out for the last few years. How have you found that, and what sort of technologies have you been sort of building?
So yeah, I mean, I mentioned that the kind of initial MVP was built externally, and then I kind of got involved to take it to market. So we inherited some decisions that weren't necessarily the decisions that I would have made. The first one being it was a microservices architecture, which has its place, but it doesn't really have its place when you're a one-person tech team. Right. In my mind, microservices is for team scaling rather than software scaling. So the fact that we weren't really intending on scaling the team anytime soon just was an initial challenge that I had to kind of overcome. So rather than running one project on my dev machine every day, I was running 3 or 4 projects on my dev machine every day. And that was also the tech stack that we inherited. So the initial APIs that were kind of there when I joined on day one were Node.js APIs and Python APIs. Neither of which, I mean, I've worked with JavaScript for 20 plus years, but neither of which would be my choice for a back-end technology. I'm very much from kind of .NET background, and I do believe that .NET is the best technology for back-end API work. I feel like I've tried 3 different ones now, and it's by far the best out of them. So that was a challenge. There were new technologies. I mean, I'd never even done anything commercially with Python before, so I had to learn that from scratch. Node had to kind of get up to speed with as well. But then obviously over time, we've leaned into that microservices architecture. So we've managed to replace some of those services and build new services. And because it was always intended to work as a collection of different services, it's meant that we can just kind of use whatever technology we want for them. That's the benefit of it, is that we haven't been tied to that tech stack from the one that I inherited. And so every API we're building now is a ASP.NET Core web API backend. On the front end, we've got a React front end. And even that, we're kind of looking now to it potentially replacing it. We'll stick with React, I think, even though that it's there's other alternatives, but React just for familiarity at this point in time. So we'd stick with that, but we've kind of got like the admin app, and now we've built a separate app for consultants, which is just kind of streamlined for their experience, and we're designed to work on mobile and everything. Because what we want is, the ideal for us is that consultants put a deal on the board, it syncs into Conquest, and then by the time they've kind of gone and rang the bell at the other side of the room, they're sitting back down, they've got a notification on their phone to say, oh, you've just made this much commission. Because you know yourself, like how rewarding that would be as a salesperson, is to just have that immediate cause and effect as soon as you've done some work and had that success. You know exactly what that means in terms of pounds and pence into your pocket. That's kind of the goal, really, to get to that point. So that's why we've kind of moved the consultants onto their own app, so we can have a bit more. We haven't got any legacy there, and we can kind of aim for what we want them to, the experience they want them to have.
I think it's a great thing to do, because it can really help, I think, with motivation. I think in my experience, when I've worked for larger organisations, when it comes to commission, it's kind of like you're responsible for it in the sense of, because there's so many people, you have to almost be like, right, okay, like you work out yourself. So you have your own spreadsheet, you work out yourself, and then you send that on to your manager maybe at the end of the month. They're probably getting the same from like 5, 6, 10 other people in the team. So then there can be quite a bit of time in terms of actually spending trying to work out on your own spreadsheet, then send it on to your manager. They validate it all. Whereas having it there, like you said, in pounds and pence, they're like, oh wow, like I've literally made that much money. Like let me see if I can try and make more commission on top. So I think that's a really interesting concept. Cause certainly, I mean, if I had that, I think that'd certainly motivate me a lot more as well.
Yeah, of course.
Knowing that that's coming through.
As you say, obviously, like a lot of people have banded schemes as well, so that they'll maybe, you get to that, you're on the threshold of that next band, and that kicks you into a multiplier. Like we see some schemes where, like, as soon as you go over, let's just say, for instance, 20k in billings for that month, then everything gets paid at a higher percentage. So even things like that, if you're sitting on 18k and you're looking at it and you can go into your commission statement and you can see how close you are, then it's like, right, let's just go and get that extra deal on, and then I know that I'm going to be, onto a good thing for the rest of the month. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, good stuff. So, so prior to Conquest, I guess we can sort of go back to the start of your journey now. When did you first, I guess, take an interest in software development?
I mean, that's going back very far now. So yeah, I mean, I was lucky really that my parents, always had computers in the house. So I'm kind of like right back to the 286 PC era. Even before Windows 95 and everything. Like Windows 3.1 was my kind of initial grounding in computers, and so I've always had an interest in it. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a game developer, designer. That was kind of like
a lot of devs do.
I was a NES kid, so I was kind of like, that's what I want to do with my life. And then as I kind of grew up a little bit, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still kind of play with that on a hobby basis now. But as I grew up a little bit, I was kind of like looking around, and my dad always kind of instilled in me like, that's where all the jobs are. So that was kind of, for me, I was kind of like, okay, I don't want to be out of work. Like my dad's had to work all over the world. He's he works in like oil and gas and heavy manufacturing kind of projects. So he goes where the projects are, and I didn't really want to have to kind of go and do that necessarily. So he was like, stick to computing. That's where that's where you're going to find, like, there's going to be plenty of jobs. So to be fair to him, it has worked out that way for me so far. So yeah, I always had in my mind that that's what I wanted to do from even a very young age. And as soon as it came to going to uni, it was only really computer science that I was ever going to go and do. So yeah, I went off, did that in Durham, spent a year in France actually as part of that, which was an eye-opener as well, learning in another language, in another culture and all the rest of it. So enjoyed that, and then just literally like probably about 2 weeks after I graduated, I was straight into work. I was hired out of the kind of milk round recruitment that they do at the university. So it was I went into Leighton Group, which was a bit of a local powerhouse up in Sunderland. They were like quite a big employer at the time, for obviously to some extent. And it was just a fantastic grounding for me, really. I remember Paul Callahan, who was the founder and the president and stuff of the group, coming to speak to us at university, and I was like, there's this company on my doorstep that are doing, working with these cool companies and all the rest of it. So I was fortunate enough to get a job there. Worked primarily on the BritishAirways.com account. So obviously for me as a new grad, I'm working on BA.com, big website. I was kind of like, wow, this is amazing. But unfortunately, as is often the case with when you're in the early part of your career, you just have to move around to go and get those early pay rises. So I kind of did that for a couple of years. It was like agency work essentially, but on BA.com, and then I went to another agency, and I was really lucky there because it was a colleague that I'd had at Leighton Group, and he was looking to hire somebody, and I went into like a 2-person team there, and I just got to work directly with him, who was like a few years more senior than me, and he just taught me a load, loads about approach and about .NET specifically, because I hadn't really, like at uni we'd done Java, so I hadn't really got my kind of feet wet on that yet. So he just taught me an absolute shed load. And then so I stayed there a couple of years, and then I was like, right, ready for the next jump in salary. So that's when I went to the test factory, and I've been working essentially with various subsets of the same people now for the last 15 years. So I was at the test factory. We did, I think it was 6 years I was there, and that went from, I was like hire number 10, something like that, all the way through to exit. So that was a fantastic journey to go on. Lots of challenges with that as well, and learned a lot as well. And then spun out of that was Technically Compatible, which I worked at for about 4 years as the CTO. That one wasn't successful and ultimately ended up being, liquidated as a business. So I learned a lot from that as well, and then kind of now I'm kind of on journey number 3 in the startup world in terms of and I feel like I've learned a lot, and now I can kind of not make the same mistakes and deploy. I'm sure I'm making new mistakes, but that's just the nature of the beast. And then obviously my business partner at Conquest, Carl, he and I go all the way back to the test factory days. So we've been basically working on all 3 of those projects for the last 15 years now. So it's kept us all busy.
Yeah. Have you found that? I know sometimes it's you can't sort of choose the path you go on, but it seems like you've been in a few businesses now where they've scaled, they've exited, and you've probably got involved quite early in the startup phase. So has that probably just happened by chance? Or
it wasn't something that I was necessarily kind of looking for when I first joined a startup. But once you've kind of been in a startup, it's hard to go back to what I would call a normal company at that point in time. You get used to decisions being quick to make and quick to act upon, and you get used to having direct contact with the different departments and the team and all the rest of it. So when I look at other companies now and I'm thinking, I don't know whether I would be well suited at this point in time to go and work for a company where I was just siloed in the tech team and I didn't ever get to go and speak to the sales team and go and speak to marketing and go and speak to success and all the rest of it, and kind of have an holistic view of the business as a whole in my decision making. And I feel like I need that now to do my job properly, because nothing should be done in a vacuum. So if I'm working on something on the product, I need to know how that's going to be marketed. I need to know how that's going to be sold. I need to know how that's going to form a demo and all the rest of it. So I feel like I can do my job better from being in that environment, and I just don't know even what I would do in a larger company, if I'm honest. So it's I feel like I'm kind of conditioned for that now. So now I would look for that, but at the time I just kind of fell into it almost because it was a good job close to home with, again, people that I knew. Like Leighton Group, I think, has spun out a lot of different businesses over the years just from people who were there. And obviously there was the big ones when I joined. So there was the Leighton portfolio kind of company which did agency work, but then there was Communicator, 4 projects. Now the amount of people that I know that have worked at both of those 2 companies that have gone on to start their own business or work in a senior position in other businesses, that's just kind of there's so many businesses that have spun out from that, and I've just been fortunate enough to kind of be on some of those journeys with them. So
absolutely, and I've got to know a lot of those people from those companies as well. So other businesses like Refract, people now work at Cognisys. There's a lot of Northeast companies where people from the Leighton Group have come out from. And I think, I mean, my next question I was thinking in my mind was I was going to ask you about how important is it to be involved with those kind of companies? Because I think sometimes again, it can be luck, it can be, right opportunity at the right time, but getting in with a company like that and learning from that must have obviously had a big impact on your career, not just in terms of the skills you've built, but the connections you've made whilst being there with other great people that have the potential to build and span out more companies as well.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, I think it kind of gives you that entrepreneurial spirit as well, which I think is important in all walks of life, because ultimately, whether you're leading a business or not, it's an entrepreneurial venture for somebody. So it's good that you've got that appreciation of it. So when I was, looking at these people who were just people from my hometown who had made a successful business and sold it for millions of pounds, that's inspiring. So you see that and you think, okay, how do I get to that? So that kind of gives you that drive to think, right, I might be on rung 1 of the ladder here today, but if I can look ahead and see people who literally live a few streets, who grew up a few streets away from where I grew up, and they've now multimillionaires and they're running multiple businesses, I'm like, well, okay, I'll get on that journey then. So I think that kind of inspiration in those earliest days, and just having just always being aware that I'm working in I'm not. I think it's easy for some tech people to kind of just feel like they're just isolated from the realities of business, just working on the thing that they're working on. It's just a technical challenge to overcome, and that's fine. But for me, I've never really had that context, because it's always been in the context of this is a business. Even when I was at Leighton, first job out of uni, my time was being built out at that point in time for I don't know, 900 a day, 1,000 a day or something like that. So I'm like, okay, so there's some value here on the time that I'm putting in. So I've got to kind of be delivering value to that. For that, if someone's paying that much money for my time, I've got to be delivering value against that time. So I've always had that kind of broader context, and I think that's what stood me in good stead now as like a leader of a business where, you know, I can look at what's not going well in other departments and I can call it out, but equally I can see why we do certain things that I wouldn't necessarily agree with if I was only focused on the technical problems and I wasn't looking at the broader business context. I might be like, well, what are we building this for? Doesn't make sense. And you can kind of see where some of those conflicts emerge. Whereas for me, it's easy for me to kind of say, well, right, I understand why we're doing that. It makes perfect sense. I've spoken to that customer. I understand what their requirement is, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think it has put me in good stead, if I'm honest.
Good. And you mentioned you learned quite a lot from someone that you're in the business with. So I guess in your journey, what would you say has helped you progress? I know it's probably, you know, you've had quite a long career, so there's got to be a lot of things. But say if you had, you know, say if you go back to maybe being somebody who's got a couple of years under your belt, what sort of things at that stage do you think helped you then progress to, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, like at that early stage, was just being in a small team. I think helped me like a lot. Like as I say, I was working directly with someone who was quite a bit more experienced than me and who could. I mean, I was asking him things all the time, and I think that's part of it as well. Is like nobody's got all the answers. Like I'm a veteran at this point in my career, but I don't have all the answers. You know, I would never try and pretend that I did have all the answers. And I think that kind of just feeds into my management style now as well. As like it's just as flat a structure as you can imagine. Because if I'm hands-on and I'm going in to look at these problems directly with people, I'm not going in with a preconceived notion of that's the only way that we can do it. There's people that are going to be joining the industry who are more talented than me, who have been on computers for a greater proportion of their life, who are more au fait with the newest technologies and stuff. So it gives you, I think working in a small team just gives you that kind of humility of like, I don't necessarily have all the answers, but equally I am capable of addressing anything that put in front of me. And I think that's part of it as well, as like getting to do greenfield development at that early stage of my career. I wasn't just kind of stuck working on an existing project for years on end where I just could only think I had like tunnel vision. That's the only way that you can build software. I was kind of like, all right, well, we've got this agency project to come in, so I'll work on that for a bit, and then another project would come in and I'd work on that for a bit, and I'd have to kind of wear different hats, and sometimes I'd be doing some work on the database, or the days I'd be doing some front end work, or the days I'd be doing some API work, or whatever it might have been. So I think just being able to kind of be like flexible and just being able to kind of adaptable to different scenarios that the business presents. I think that's a vital skill to have in business, like adaptability. And I think in software, like, you know, now when I build software, characteristic that I'm most aim for to have is to be changeable, because what's true today might not be true tomorrow. And I think when you're working in startups and in agencies, that's more true than ever. You know, like we could win a client tomorrow who could completely change the trajectory of our project. So if I'm turning around saying, well, we can't do any work on that because I've got the next 6 months planned out here and I'm pretty rigid that I want to stay on that, and we've built it this certain way that isn't changeable, then I haven't done my job very well. So I feel like the products that I put out need to be changeable, and I need to be adaptable to whatever the business needs me to be adaptable to.
Yeah, I think especially with your most current company, when you work in the recruitment industry, it is very, very complex. Like things can change a lot. The way the market is, the environment, that can change a lot as well. Companies can pivot a lot. There's a lot of changes and differences that can happen. So I think it's really interesting what you said there about you know, having that software that's changeable, because then you can be more valuable to your customers. And I think at the end of the day, the customers they're the most important, and they're going to have complex, you know, challenges and everything like that. So if you are, like you said, quite rigid, you're almost like an off-the-shelf product at that point. So you got to have some of that. So how did you get into management? Was it something that you wanted to pursue actively, or was it just like an opportunity that came and you kind of fell into it?
I've always been a very conscientious member of the team, and I've always been very like responsible. So naturally, just responsibilities have just made their way towards me. So it's not something that I necessarily was like, that's the path I want to be on. I mean, to be honest, like to this day, I'm still hands-on. So that's where I want to be. That's where my passion lies, you know, building software. And I feel like I'm almost, I don't know how I could manage without that side of it, because I feel like it would be so abstract that, you know, I would just have to be trusting what I'm being told all the time. And I feel eventually that the value I could offer in that scenario would probably just diminish. But I just naturally just fell into management just because I was the person who didn't want to see the project like if there was a release needed doing on a Friday or whatever, I'd be the person who put my hand up to do it, because I wanted to see that go into production. Or if there was a problem on a weekend, I'd probably be the person who'd like see it first in the messaging app or whatever, and I'd be like, oh, I better jump on that. So obviously you take those extra responsibilities like unprompted, and then eventually people look at you and say, oh, well, this guy's responsible, so I'll give him more responsibilities. And that's kind of what's always kind of just happened over my career, is that it's like, oh, well, you know everything about this project because you've kind of made sure that you know everything about this project, so you just now own that project. And then you get a few of them and it's like, all right, now you're managing this whole team that's running all of those projects. And that's kind of like how it's been. But the last couple of jobs, to be honest, haven't really, I mean, there's definitely a management element to the job I'm doing, but it's such a small team that I just see myself as part of the team. And, you know, I think the only thing that kind of differentiates me to the rest of the team really is just I might be the person who just makes the final kind of call on something, or I maybe bring a bit of a context that's a bit broader than what the rest of the team is necessarily thinking of at that point in time, just because I've had the conversations. So, you know, I might have spoken to Carl and he's come to me and saying, all of our sales pitches are going a certain way. It seems like there's a bit of a trend. People need this requirement. I can then bring that to the team and be almost like a conduit between what the customers are telling us and what the rest of the business are telling us and what the team are working on, so that everything's always set in a kind of context of like, this is why we're doing it. And we'll debate things and we'll discuss approach to things and the way that we might like address that problem. But then ultimately, if someone needs to just make a final call, then I'm more than willing to be the person to step up and do that. And that's kind of that's probably the only difference. Otherwise, just working with a team as a developer, essentially, day in, day out.
Yeah. Could you ever imagine being like almost fully hands off?
Fully hands off. I mean, I could imagine it because, you know, I'm not getting any younger, and I wouldn't say like I can't ever imagine doing it, but at this point in time, I just don't know how I could do that job well without being hands-on, because I just feel like it's ultimately software development. It's more of a design exercise than it is like a production-based exercise. Like that's just a byproduct of the design. So if I'm completely hands off and I'm not involved in that design process, then what am I doing? I'm just a bean counter? Am I just just checking that people are like doing what I've told them to do? Like, that's just not the way I operate. I'd rather be addressing the problems directly, and then I just feel like that's just how I've always operated. That's how I've done it across my career. And it's funny when we're talking about it, and I think back to those earliest days, I was doing it even then. So it's kind of like I can see now, looking back, why I am how I am. So yeah, I mean, I just feel like I don't think I'd be very good at the job if I wasn't hands-on, just because it's like I feel like that's the value that I can bring is the my input into that design process. Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about like high-performing teams. So I know you mentioned that you've had some really successes, but then you've also had some experiences where you've learned from where company essentially has been liquidated as well. So you don't have to draw on too much about specifics, but maybe like what would you say has been some factors into like maybe creating like high-performing teams, and then what sort of lessons could you learn from where things don't go right, because they don't always go right as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, like, collaboration and communication is the absolute key to a high-performing team. And I'm not talking just the technical team here, I'm talking the business as a whole. I feel like a lot of businesses fall into the trap of kind of scatter and gather. So it's kind of like, okay, this is the general direction of travel. Now everybody go off into their own departments and just work separately. And then we'll all come back together in a month's time and we'll see how we've all got on against that. Now, that I just feel just doesn't work very well, and I feel like that is ultimately was the problem that we had at Technically Compatible, because we essentially in the technical team, we looked at the existing product that had been spun out of the test factory and we felt it couldn't necessarily sustain and support all of the things that we wanted it to do. So we built a new product. Now, we went off and we built that in isolation from the rest of the business over the course of a year. Massive mistake. Not a mistake I'll never repeat again, because all that it meant was that when we were ready to go live, the rest of the business wasn't aligned to that. They were just happy selling the old product as much as possible and trying to make the best of that. Then we were like, oh, we've got this new product and it does the X, Y, Z, and this is the one you want to be selling now. And they're like, well, okay, we've got to change everything now. Whether that be marketing, whether that be their sales pitch, whatever it might be, they're like, right, we've got to go and change everything now to support, to go and sell this new thing. And I was actually getting quite good at selling the old thing. If we collaborated more, I feel, across the business in terms of like, and I also, I mean, the other mistake we made is just like we rebuilt a product to do the same thing. Like, why did we do that? Right. What value was that bringing to the customer, really? Yeah, maybe in the future it's a better foundation in order for us to be able to go and deliver more things for them. But it was a mistake, and I feel like ultimately that was quite a fatal mistake for the business, just because, it was like all the eggs got put in that basket, and then after a year and a half, the business wasn't aligned to making the most of that. And So yeah, for me, collaboration and communication are the most important aspects. If I'm thinking about like on the technical side specifically, for me, approach is everything. Like, and by that I mean I don't want people coming with just like a pre-baked idea of like arbitrary solutions to something. Like, I want people to look at the problem that's in front of them and approach it in that way. Like, there's a problem to be solved here, and it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution to that problem. Just because you did this solution over here doesn't mean it's the right solution over here. So that's the main characteristic I would hire for now, is just trying to get into the crux of like, what is their approach to problem solving? Are they coming saying, well, we always do it this way? It's got to be CQRS, otherwise, or it's got to be done NT or whatever it might be. Like, I don't want to hear that. I just want to hear like, right, let's just get into the actual problem that's in front of us, and we'll see what the solution looks like. And that's the way we should be approaching all of the problems that we encounter in tech, in my mind.
Yeah. Okay. And so when you were managing your team, how did you ever feel like, okay, now like this is a brand new thing, I'm responsible for obviously a team of people. Was there any particular steps that you thought I need to take now to try and like improve my management skills or improve how I am as a leader? And obviously even till this day, is there anything that you do to help you in that aspect?
It's honestly probably not as much as I should. I try and stay on top of the sort of like the industry, if you like. So, listen to a ton of podcasts, follow all of the influencer types on social media, read, the various websites, be it Reddit, Hacker News, whatever it might be. So I try and stay on top of things and try and make sure that the team are kind of kept up to speed with all of the things that they need to be kept up to speed with. And sometimes I'll just present a new technology and just get canvas opinion on it or whatever it might be. In terms of like actual kind of soft skills and working on them and being like a better people manager, it's not something I've ever really worked on. I don't think I'm terrible at it. I could probably be better at it. I'm not really one that like loves conflict or anything like that in terms of, having to be the arbiter of bad news or anything like that. It's not something that's ever really like I've been that comfortable with, but I do just try and be honest. Yeah. Like, honesty is just my policy there, really. Like, so if somebody comes to me and it's like, oh well, can I do this, and I know they can't do that, then I just have to be honest with them and I'll explain the reasons and try and give them as much transparency as I can. And that's all I can really do. And I feel like over the years that has kind of gathered the respect of my peers and my colleagues. It's just that they know they're going to get an honest answer from me, and normally a pragmatic answer as well. I don't try and like string them along and say, oh well, it's going to be much better in a few months' time. I'll just give them a kind of blunt answer on what the situation is, and we'll move on from it. And I feel like that's kind of not always the answer they want to hear, but at least they know it's an honest answer they're getting from me. Yeah. But yeah, it's not something that I haven't really like sought out like additional mentors on the management side or anything, but maybe it's something I should consider.
Yeah, it might be something as you scale. So I think, as you mentioned, that you found yourself being in maybe a bit smaller teams, which meant that you're still, even though you're like one of the maybe senior members of the team, you're still pretty much hands-on and you're part of the team. So you're almost like, well, not almost, but you are in the trenches with the team. So 100%. It's almost like you're the leader of the team that way. But then as the company scales, or as you may become more hands-off, that's when, but I think sometimes it's if you've got a passion for it as well. So like some people that I've spoken to on the podcast, they have a real passion for people management, and that's the area that they really want to focus on. But then you've got some people who, even if they're not managing, like some people in software would just want to be a techie. They don't really want to do the people management side. I think from speaking to you, you're sort of somewhere in the middle. Again, it's going to be... sometimes it's just how the company develops and how it scales. So naturally, if the company hopefully grows really well, then you may find yourself that, okay, you've got a team of 5 to 10 people now. So now it's going to take your time to speak to their management. That's when you may sort out a mentor or it's just at the right time, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I think from what you've said, it's quite interesting because you are doing like the right things for what's needed, I guess, in the business right now.
And that's I try and be adaptable. So if I have to adapt to be a manager and hands off, then I'll make that adaptation. As I say, I don't know how good I'll be at it. Just being a full-time manager, like I feel like I'll be kind of like thinking, I need to get hands on here. It's been so many years now of doing that I think I would struggle to adapt, but I would try and adapt. And I have done it in the past. I have been hands off for a period of time. Yeah. But it is tough. And skill in tech teams generally is just tough. To go from 2 heads that we are today, one of which is me, to like 10 heads, that in itself is like, I can't even think how we might get to that point, just because it's diminishing returns on your first couple of hires, because obviously we've been in there for years now, and we've worked with the guy I'm talking about, worked with him for over 10 years as well. So like, those relationships are automatic, and we just kind of like, we can go pay a program for 8 hours in the day, and it's like, okay, we know what, it's almost like I'm preempting what he's going to say, he's preempting what I'm going to say, that kind of thing. So it's hard to bring anybody into that kind of tight-knit circle, but if it has to happen, it has to happen. And then, but then it's just like, how far can you go with that before you've just got too many people and you have to change the whole approach to things? It's a tough one. It's a tough challenge to solve for sure.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about culture. So you've worked in obviously some agencies, you've worked in some SaaS companies as well. So obviously there's a famous Peter Drucker quote, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
What do you think of this quote?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think I see where he's coming from with it, and I do think culture is obviously like vitally important, but equally, I just don't think you can neglect strategy. I think strategy breeds culture in a way, because if the strategy's right, people believe in it, and if people believe in it, then the culture's good, and that's ultimately what you need to achieve as a software business, is that people need to believe in the direction that you're going in, and that you're on the right track. And if you've got that, you'll probably end up having a good culture. If people don't believe in the strategy, you might end up with a toxic culture, because people are questioning everything, and they're like, well, why are we doing that? And I've been there, like in a business that was failing, and people are like looking at decisions that have been made, and they're just questioning it and saying, why are we doing this at this point in time? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And as again, where communication is just so vital. Like if you can, even if the strategy is wrong, if you can communicate the strategy effectively and people can at least understand the rationale behind it, then that's part of the problem. But if you've only got culture and there's no strategy, then what have you got at that point? Equally, I mean, I don't really think like culture and strategy are mutually exclusive, but I think strategy and tactics is probably the more interesting debate there, because it's very easy in a small business especially just to become very tactical. So it's kind of like, we'll just look at what we're going to do today, and we'll just look at what the latest sales demo tells us we need, or the latest support ticket tells us that we need. And you just become hyper tactical to the point where you almost forget about strategy, and you kind of, sometimes you have to just zoom right out and say, why are we doing this again? Because you get, I mean, I find myself doing it, even you get in the kind of maelstrom of a particular problem, maybe a small customer's had this particular issue and they're not very happy about it, and you just kind of like, you zoom out and you're thinking, okay, that's fine, but like, that's just one customer among many, and it's one problem. So, let's just give it a bit of perspective. Does that align with us where we want to go strategically? No. Okay, so we're probably not going to do anything product-wise to help that customer, but we can still give them good service. But that's just kind of like part of growing up as a business. I think when you start when you're a startup, everything's so hyper tactical all the time, because you just want to survive. Yeah. You want to survive another month. You want to survive another year, to survive long enough to have something that's meaningful. Once you've got through that survival phase, that's when strategy needs to come in. And obviously, you want to have good culture to go alongside that as well.
Yeah. So what do you think's been like good culture in terms of when you've worked in businesses? So I think I kind of align and agree with what you're saying there in terms of like, if the strategy isn't there, then what is just a good culture on its own? Because you have to, I think as a business, and maybe it might be because I've worked in small businesses, you've worked in startups where you said you're in, it's almost like it is a survival mode at the start, and you're doing all you can to just obviously get to the next month and next year. What sort of been maybe a culture that that's helped, or what's worked well in your experience?
I mean, I think success helps. I think if the business seems to be succeeding, and I think it really helps if that success is communicated as well, because it's so easy, and especially as a business starts to scale. I mean, at the test factory, I think eventually we scaled at like 40 plus heads, and you lose sight of what other departments are doing, and you lose sight of the wins that they're having on a daily basis. And I was just seeing actually a couple of my former colleagues they're in another business now, and they're running their own podcast. And I was listening to the podcast, and I was kind of like, I wasn't having these conversations with them when I was there. Like, even though they were friends of mine and I get on great with them, I wasn't having the conversation with them to kind of find out what the challenges were and what their successes were and all the rest of it. So I would have said that was quite a good culture at the time. Maybe it wasn't, Maybe I wasn't looking outside of my own little bubble and looking at what the rest of the business was up to and the challenges that they were facing. So I think you need to make sure that everybody in the business is aligned to a common goal, and you need to make sure that you constantly communicate and progress towards that goal. And I think if you can have that, then I think the culture just stems from that, because even if you're not 100% happy, you're given a task that you don't want to do, or you've been stuck on a particular problem for the last couple of weeks and it's driving you mad, if you can at least see that it's having a success, then I think your culture's probably all right after that. I think if people are working on those things and then they just feel like it's going into the ether and it's not really doing anything to move the business forward, that's when frustration sets in. That's when people start questioning other decisions and they start looking for problems that are elsewhere in the business. So I think you can't guarantee success, but you can guarantee communication. And so if you keep communicating, even if it's unsuccessful, people would rather know. They'd rather know that the people running the business have identified that it's been an unsuccessful period, that they've been honest about it, they've explored and analysed the reasons why it's been unsuccessful, and they're going to do something about it. That's all you can really ask for as a team member, that the people that you're putting your faith in by working there, and they put faith in you by hiring you, but you put your faith in them by giving a portion of your career to that company and trusting that you can grow with that company. So I think you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, okay, they've had a bad quarter, we haven't sold much or whatever, but at least we've owned it, at least we've communicated about it, at least we know that what's going to change going forward, and then no toxicity will set in and the culture will stay good.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's really interesting. I want to talk a little bit about interviews and applications. So I work with a lot of junior, mid, senior developers, people that are looking for work, and I like to do just a little bit of a segment in terms of like what how people can almost be like successful at interviews, and how they can make sure that they give a good account of themselves. So what would you say you would potentially look for yourself when you interview a developer who's coming in to work for yourselves? Yeah. What sort of things do you like to look for, and what would help somebody become successful?
Well, I mean, as I said to you before, it really, for me, approach is the number one characteristic that I'm looking for when it comes to hiring. So, I mean, I've been thinking about this recently because obviously I worked in Technically Compatible, and for people who don't know that was a software product which was designed around assessing developers as part of a recruitment process. And I feel like, I worked there, I feel like I've gone complete 180 on that being an appropriate way of hiring people. I think multi-choice tests and take-home exercises even, I just don't really feel like there's that much value in them, because you're not collaborating on that thing. It's scatter and gather again. So you're saying, here's a take-home project, go and work on it on your own for the next week or something, using up lots of your own time. I mean, I know sometimes people do paid tests, but lots of your own time. Come back, you might be going on completely the wrong track, but there's no opportunity for course correction, and that just is what it is. So for me now, I feel like if I was hiring tomorrow, I obviously have an initial interview just to kind of check that there's a broad fit there, but I would want to just as soon as possible just get onto a paid programming session and collaborate with them on that, to say, right, let's just look at a problem in the context of this business. So I'm not going giving you something that you're never going to work on again if you were to come and join us, and just work through it with them, and just and then all I'm looking for really is just like, what questions are they asking? Are they trying to like guess at things that they don't know? Are they humble enough to be able to kind of say, I don't know the answer to that, but I can go and find the answer to that, because ultimately that's part of the skill as well. I'm not looking to assess the memory, and a lot of the assessments and stuff like that done are just memory assessments. It's like, well, what is the syntax for this method in C# or whatever? I'm like, well, I would look that up. Like I haven't committed that to memory, because I don't need to commit that to memory. I've got the internet there to help me with that. I'll be looking for them to say, right, I'll just double check that. Okay, I remember what that is now. So this is. I would much rather they were just honest about that. So I think it's hard for juniors, because you go into interviews, and what a lot of juniors want, or think that the other person sitting across from them wants to hear, is that they just know everything. But when you're experienced enough, you know that nobody knows everything. So I'd rather they just came in and just were like, yeah, I'm not sure the answer to that. I think I know what you're getting at, and we can just have a conversation about it. And if they kind of come in and they've got that attitude, that'd be way more appealing to me than somebody who just comes in who just feels like they know everything and starts guessing at things that they don't necessarily know.
Yeah. I think you'd have probably had experiences yourself when you were interviewing initially for jobs. So would you say you've maybe took some of your interview styles from interviews that you maybe enjoyed?
Well, equally the ones I haven't enjoyed as well. The whiteboard exercises, and I had one interview quite a few years ago now where it was all about, was almost like a Mensa style sort of assessment. Everything was in the abstract, so it was kind of like you've got 7 balls and they all weigh a certain amount, and how do you find the heaviest ball? And obviously I understood what they were looking to assess with that, but at the same time, I was just kind of like, this just feels like too abstract compared to why don't we just talk about the actual problems that you have in the business, and we can kind of see if I might be a good fit for helping you solve those problems, rather than this abstract problem of like weighing balls. It's kind of, and then even though the ones where much earlier in my career I did a take-home test, thought I did reasonably enough on it, came in and they just tore it apart, and I was like, oh, okay. And don't get me wrong, like I took that on the chin, and I was kind of like, right, maybe I've been a little bit too much in my comfort zone here, and maybe I need to kind of upskill a little bit, and that's kind of I took that as a positive that I can go and learn from that. But at the same time, I was kind of like, I don't really want to put people in that position. I don't want to bringing people in who've had to take time off work, they've had to fit around family, they've travelled to come into an interview just for me to go and tear apart something that they've produced in their own time as part of an application process for a job. I was kind of like, that's not a culture I want to be a part of. So almost like the negative experiences I've had have probably influenced me more than the positive experiences I've had.
Yeah.
Equally, I went for a job not long after I graduated at Durham Uni, which is where I'd been for undergrad. And then when I went in, it was just a panel of people, all kind of stuffy academics, and I was just like that just put me on the back foot straight away. I didn't feel like I could do my best as a candidate in that scenario, just because it felt so judged. Felt like I was walking into a courtroom rather than an interview room. So always try and put people at ease in the process as well, and just let them know, like, this is a conversation between 2 adults. It's not me as like judge and jury just deciding everything. Like, you ask me questions. It's ultimately any recruitment exercise. It's a 2-way thing. Sometimes the employer holds the cards, sometimes the employee holds the cards, especially in this industry where, it's typically there's more jobs than there are candidates. You have to meet them on their level and let them, they're judging you as much as you're judging them, and you should understand that if you're going into any sort of recruitment process, in my mind.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I do find it hard to believe, that companies still think it's fine to, like you said, tear apart somebody's tech test, because it's just going to give a bad experience to them. Yeah. And you never know what the future holds. Like, they might not be ready, or they might not be at the level you're looking for right now, but who's to say in 2 years they couldn't develop those experiences or get better and then apply again. But I can guarantee even yourself, you'd never want to reapply to that company again because of the way that they've approached that. Yeah. And I think there is an appreciation for like candidate experience now. And I speak to a lot of internal talent teams, and that's something that they really, really focus hard on, because they want to make sure that the candidate experience is good, feedback is good, because in the software industry as well, it can be quite small, where one developer will know another one, and even when I've spoken to developers, they'll tell me if they've got friends that have worked for a company or friends that have interviewed somewhere, and then they've got feedback from them, and then they've said, I don't think I'd want to apply for there because of things that I've heard. And obviously now, things like Glassdoor, it's really visible. There's so many developers I speak to that say to me, I've had a look at their Glassdoor reviews. So I think as a company, I think you have to be a bit more aware of these things, because I don't think in our industry that it is, there is choices out there, and you don't hold all the cards, as you said. I think there's a lot of choice out there, so you have to be attractive, and you have to be, I guess, an attractive place to work, but also have a good candidate experience as well. Because everything's
it's
so
massive,
visible.
like you say. I mean, it's a small world. We were just sitting out there talking, and the amount of people that we both know from the industry, it's especially, I mean, in the northeast where we're both based, it's 1 degree of separation probably from anybody that you might speak to, because there's probably like 10 companies in the northeast that pretty much everyone's worked for at some point. Yeah. So if I'm hiring somebody and I'm like, I know somebody who worked there, I'll go and ask them. It's just the way it is. So it's I think candidate experience is really important, and hopefully companies now are wising up to that, and it's not as quite as abrasive an interview style as some of the ones I experienced like 10, 15 years ago. Yeah.
So I know that we didn't really speak about this when we were doing like our prep call, but we got speaking earlier on, and we were talking about hybrid and office work, and sort of how that's changed from the pandemic. So this isn't really something I've spoken to about with any of my guests really, but I thought it could be something that we could speak about, because we had a bit of a discussion about it earlier. I think everybody knows the market how it is now, where as I was saying, I think it's very rare. I've maybe worked with 1 or 2 companies that want people in the office 5 days a week, but everyone else, it's hybrid and flexible.
Yeah.
You know, what are your thoughts on that? How does it work where you are, and what do you think's been working well for you as well?
We're fully remote at the moment. I think on the tech side, we'll probably stay fully remote. It's a tricky one. I mean, obviously, I've worked in offices like for years and years and years, so like I can see some of the upsides of office-based work. And you know, we talk about collaboration, communication, all that kind of thing. I do believe that they are fundamental tenets of successful businesses, and sometimes that can be better in person, that communication. However, I do tend to more towards now saying remote is better for me and for my teams anyway, because I just feel like the collaboration and communication is probably actually a bit better online than it was in person, because everyone's busy all the time and you're getting dragged into meetings and all the rest of it, whereas there's a bit more availability of time now, so that communication can find its place, and obviously everything's getting logged in Slack and whatever else anyway. So we're fully remote. I don't know whether we'll stay fully remote as a business, but I think probably on the tech side we probably will. But I think it is useful to have some base that you can kind of gather at and just, you know, talk like we've been talking today. Or but it's hard to mandate now. You know, like I see companies saying like 3 days a week in, you know, Newcastle or whatever it might be. But now people are looking at that and they're thinking, well, that's 6 hours a week. I've got to go and travel to Newcastle. If somebody's living in like Teesside, where we are today, and they've got to travel to Newcastle, it's an hour's travel or whatever. So they think that's 6 hours. That's another day a week that I'm pretty much working now just on commute.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard thing. Is just like it's adapting back to commuting. Like it's not so much the being in person. I think if everyone could just like, you know, jump in the TARDIS and be there like a few seconds later, I think everyone would be fine with it. I think it's just people now just like have got used to that time being their own again, and they don't want to necessarily be, you know, having to travel an hour through rush hour traffic, getting on the metro or whatever it might be, to then go and sit all day and then go through the same process. It's like people got wound tight doing that over many, many years, and it's almost like people just didn't realise that there was another way. And I think that, you know, companies thrived in a lot of companies thrived in the pandemic, and certainly after the pandemic when remote working was still in place. So it can work and can be very successful. So, you know, put the people first really is my motto on that really.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there's been a lot of changes since COVID, but probably for the better, I think, when it comes to remote working. And I think as I've got older, as I've got responsibilities, you know, I've got a son. I know you mentioned you've got 2 daughters as well. You know, you do need that bit of flexibility, and, you know, you do need that time to be able to sort everything out in your personal life 100%. As well. So it's really helped with that. So what would you say are the sort of plans now? So obviously the investment from Bullhorn has come in. So what would you say are the next steps for Conquest, and what would you like to achieve in the coming years?
We're raising further funds, so complete a larger round, which will just capitalise us now for the next few years, hopefully, of growth. Where we've made a key hire into the sales department, and we'll be looking to grow that team in the very short term. And now it's just kind of essentially, you know, just aiming to grow as much as possible. That's kind of like the aspiration for the business. You know, all startup businesses ultimately have an exit plan and everything else, and we're no different to that. But right now, focus is on growth. So I suspect that'll end up being growth across, obviously, hopefully revenue, but as behind that, the team as well. So I suspect we'll at the minute we're like 5 heads, you know, small company, but I think in the next couple of years that'll probably be, you know, 4 or 5 times that size, maybe even more, and we'll grow. Hopefully a great success, and that's kind of like that's the plan really. And we've done enough so far to prove that we're definitely solving a problem here, and there's definitely people interested in it and all the rest of it. So now we're going to face a new set of problems, which is the scaling problem, and you know, scaling across everything. And we're not going in. It's not our first rodeo, so we're not going into that blind. That, you know, that is challenging, but that's kind of the medium term plans now, is just to get the business ready to scale, and across every different department. You know, it's going to need some resource, it's going to need some capital, it's going to need some effort. So that's kind of where we're at as a business now. Yeah,
I think possibilities are endless. I mean, in recruitment, it's international, it's global, like every country. And I think, you know, especially when you've got salespeople, there's always going to be, I think, a need and a problem. And I think it's really interesting. And so I was really pleased to get you on, because it's the industry I work in. So it's nice to maybe have a little bit more insight into the sort of problem you're trying to solve, because I do speak with other software companies and I could probably like understand what they're trying to do, but with this, because it's in my industry, I've got a bit more of a deeper understanding. So it's been a great chat and getting to know you and the company more. So just thank you very much for coming through today, John. And obviously wish you and Conquest all the best for the future as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Same for you.